Hello again, everyone. Steve Beverly with you with the post-game show for Live PD tonight. And between Danny Brown and Alyssa Wright, I don't know who had the most activity, but by a nose, I gave the Officer of the Night award to Alyssa Wright. Let me tell you something. You think about everything she was up against. I didn't know whether that was a pit bull in that yard that potentially was going to strike her. You just don't know. But for her to take on two, I don't care how small or large they were, for her to take on two at once and pin them in. There's an old thing in professional wrestling called a handicap match where one person takes on two. And Alyssa Wright proved tonight that she could win the belt for that. My goodness, I was impressed. But also I was impressed, whereas she had to be firm, and particularly a couple of times she had to be a bit loud with the woman who was just talking out of her head and out of control. Still, the calm that she maintained, and she knew every move to make, when to call for help, and then the analysis that she gave us in the field to explain why she did some of the things that she did and what her experience taught her was really what could be prevalent to happen in a case like that. I was just really impressed with her. But now, folks, don't you think that she and Veronica Van Patten could, in some instances, pass for sisters? I mean, it may be the hairstyle, but they have a striking resemblance to each other. But, oh my goodness, they have got to get one or both of them in the studio eventually. I mean, I know we love Styx, and we have been enjoying seeing Tapler and Moeller, but I want to hear their perspective. I want to hear what Alyssa Wright has to say when she's watching it from the vantage point of the studio. And the same thing with Veronica Van Patten. It would just really be, I think, a top show if they could get one of the two of them or both for a future edition. So let's all lobby for that. Danny Brown tonight, though, whew, he was everywhere. You talk about the most places, and gave us our big chase of the night, unquestionably. And once again, it comes back to the fact that people who are repeat offenders, as the first guy that they captured, people who are repeat offenders, they always have no sense of responsibility. They're not going to take any ownership of it, and they don't get that it's worse when they don't take responsibility for it. And I know that and one of the things we've been going through in our community here in Jackson, Tennessee, is that we're in the process of trying to get a new jail built, because the one that was built just 24 years ago is inadequate now. But in addition to incarceration, you have got to give them rehabilitation as much as possible. And that gets on some people's nerves, because some people feel like that, just let them rot. But if we're going to keep the recidivism rate in our community, we've got an 85% recidivism rate in the jails. We have got to give them something that's of an education and can get them to where they can become productive citizens. Is it going to happen for all of them? No. Is it going to happen even for a majority of them? No. But if we say got 10 to 15% of them, and it did make a difference, and they were able to get into society and mainstream and get their act together, it would be an awful lot less on the taxpayers. Not to give you a sermon or a commentary tonight, but that's just what we're going through in our community right now. But, oh my goodness, it has just been, I think, the whole of both nights, with the massive chases that we had last night that had everybody on edge. But for a minute, I was really worried that Alyssa Wright was in terrible trouble, and it brings up the question again about sending a single officer into a domestic situation that always seems to be the most dangerous, and officers will tell you that. We have a sergeant, Mike Thomas, here in our community that was investigating a domestic situation at a convenience store, and he was ambushed. This has been about 20 months ago. He was ambushed and kicked within probably 2 kicks of losing his life. He's back on the job and working well. And I'll put up a link to an interview that Jackson 24/7, the newscast I supervise. I'll put up a link to the interview because you're going to get some, I think, really interesting perspective from him, what it's like to have to go through the surgery and recovery that he did. But I was really worried from that standpoint for Alyssa. But man, when you saw how she was able to handle herself in that situation, it was one of the most impressive things that I've seen since Live PD has been on the air. Well, I'm going to let it go at that tonight because I think for whatever we saw throughout the evening, those were the signature moments that we were able to deal with. I'll be coming your way with pregame and postgame from Columbus, Georgia on Friday night, making a few travels here before a new semester of my university starts. And it's good to be with you online. It's so much fun to have some tweets and some interesting chats during the course of the show each week. And so let's continue that. One last thing. We were talking online before the show. Let's keep the idea alive. Possibility of having a fan convention, a Live PD fan convention. There are so many of us, I can't believe that we wouldn't have at least 400 to 500 that would be willing to come. And we were talking about the possibility, would we do it in South Carolina first, because they have two counties in which the show follows. Let's just keep thinking about that. And it's tough reserving big blocks of hotel rooms, and you got to be sure people are going to show up for things like that. So it would be something I don't think you could really afford to do before the summer of 2018. But let's all keep online some conversation going about that. I'm going to let it go with you tonight, but until we're with you next Friday night, this is Steve Beverly saying, remember this: if you hear there's a fight, call Officer Alyssa Wright. See you next Friday night.